There are lives in Hollywood that unfold quietly, not in headlines or scandals, but in the private spaces where memory speaks louder than fame. At 89, Woody Allen looks back on nearly 7 decades of work and relationships with a tone far softer than the one audiences once associated with him. He reflects on the women who shaped his life, some briefly, some profoundly, some in ways he never fully understood until much later. These are not dramatic confessions, but measured acknowledgments of admiration, influence, and the lessons time eventually forces all of us to face. As he revisits these chapters, one truth becomes clear. Each woman left a trace on his journey, and one of them, number 3, remains his deepest and most complicated regret, a story he still revisits with quiet introspection. Stay with this story until the end. Every chapter carries its own meaning, and the final truth is revealed only when the last name is spoken. Number 1. Harleen Rosen. Before Woody Allen became a recognizable name in American cinema, he was a young man still trying to understand what he wanted from life. In those early years, long before film sets and award stages, Harleen Rosen was the person closest to him. Their connection formed quietly, without the noise or glamour that would later surround his career. He often described their early relationship as two young people learning how to navigate adulthood with limited resources and plenty of uncertainty. In his memoir, Apropos of Nothing, Woody recalls how Harleen offered a sense of steadiness during a period when he was experimenting with writing jokes and submitting them to small publications. She encouraged him in ways that mattered at the time, by listening, by reading his early attempts, and by giving him room to figure out his creative direction. She witnessed the very beginning of the traits that later defined him: his humor, his anxieties, his constant need to shape ideas into words. Their marriage was short, and Woody has been open about how youth and inexperience made it difficult for both of them. They were growing at different speeds, discovering different versions of themselves, and the relationship naturally found its end. But even in later interviews, he acknowledged the importance of those early years. Harleen was part of the foundation, someone who knew him before success, before public attention, before the complexities of fame. There is no dramatic overtone to their story, only the simple truth of a first marriage lived in modest rooms with early ambitions and the everyday challenges of two young adults. Harleen Rosen remains the first woman who supported his creative beginnings, leaving a quiet but lasting presence in the early chapters of his life. Number 2. Louise Lasser. When Woody Allen looks back on the early 1960s, he often describes that period as a time when his career began to move in unexpected directions. Television writing, stand-up comedy, and early film opportunities were all converging at once. And in the middle of this shift stood Louise Lasser, the woman he married after his first marriage ended. Their relationship was shaped not just by personal connection, but by a shared understanding of performance, ambition, and the unusual rhythm of show business. Louise entered his life with a different kind of presence. She was sharp, quick-witted, and creatively in tune with him in ways that felt new. In his memoir, Woody mentions how she understood his working habits, his long hours, his intense focus, and his tendency to rewrite until a scene felt right. She had her own acting aspirations and a clear sense of timing, something he admired deeply. Their conversations often circled around scripts, characters, and the emotional tone of comedy, giving their marriage a unique creative texture. They collaborated professionally during this time, and Woody credited her with bringing a distinct energy to several of his early projects. Her style, slightly idiosyncratic, emotionally layered, and unpredictably humorous, fit naturally with the tone he was developing as a filmmaker. Even years later, he would remember her performances with a sense of genuine respect. But the pressures of rising careers and conflicting personalities inevitably shaped their relationship. Woody has openly said that they were two very different people, and their differences grew more pronounced with time. Still, he acknowledged Louise's role in helping him navigate a crucial period of transition, when success was arriving faster than he expected. Their marriage ended, but the creative connection they shared left its mark. Louise Lasser became part of the early evolution of his artistic identity, someone who matched his energy at a moment when his life was rapidly changing. Number 3. Diane Keaton. Among all the collaborations in Woody Allen's long career, few became as iconic or as mutually transformative as his relationship with Diane Keaton. When he first met her in the late 1960s, during auditions for the Broadway production of Play It Again, Sam, she stood out immediately. Tall, unconventional, effortlessly charming, Keaton brought a mix of humor and natural sincerity that matched the tone Woody was still trying to define. He often recalled, both in interviews and in Apropos of Nothing, that she had an instinct that aligned perfectly with his creative sensibilities. Their bond formed gradually, shaped by long rehearsals, shared observations of New York life, and a similar approach to comedy, dry, honest, and slightly offbeat. Keaton understood the rhythm of his dialogue almost intuitively, and he admired the ease with which she could shift from humorous to heartfelt without ever forcing the emotion. Their off-screen relationship, though brief, set the foundation for a working partnership that would span decades. The films they made together, Annie Hall, Manhattan, Sleeper, Love, and Death, became touchstones not only in Woody's career, but in American cinema itself. Woody always credited Keaton for bringing authenticity to characters who might otherwise have felt purely comedic. She gave them depth, subtlety, and a grounded sense of humanity. Her performance in Annie Hall, drawn from parts of her own personality, helped elevate the film into something more intimate and reflective than originally planned. Even after their romance ended, their respect for each other remained consistent and public. Woody has often described her as someone who made everything she touched better. And Keaton, in interviews and in her memoir, has spoken fondly of the creative trust they shared. Their partnership shaped an entire era of his filmmaking, becoming one of the most admired actor-director relationships of its time. Number 4. Stacey Nelkin. In the landscape of Woody Allen's early career, there were moments that he later spoke about carefully. Moments that belonged more to the private side of his life than to the spotlight. Stacey Nelkin was one of those figures mentioned briefly in interviews, most notably in his memoir, Apropos of Nothing, where he referenced their relationship with a tone that was measured and factual. It was a short chapter in his life, one that unfolded during a period of personal transition and creative momentum. Stacey was a young actress at the time, beginning her own career, and their connection developed quietly. Woody described their relationship without dramatic framing, acknowledging it as something that happened during a period when his personal life was changing quickly. He spoke of her with simplicity. No exaggeration, no heavy sentiment. Just an acknowledgement of someone he spent time with while navigating the increasing demands of fame and film work. Their time together was limited, shaped more by circumstance than long-term intention. Woody has often emphasized in interviews that his life during this era moved rapidly. New projects, constant writing, shifting relationships, and the unpredictable nature of the entertainment industry. Stacey became part of that timeline, someone he remembered without dismissal, but without unnecessary embellishment. There was also a note of caution in how he later addressed their connection publicly. Woody understood how memory could be reshaped over time, especially when examined through the lens of fame. He chose to speak about Stacey in a straightforward manner, acknowledging the relationship while keeping it within the context of its era. Though their paths split early and definitively, he maintained a tone of respect when mentioning her. Stacey Nelkin remained a brief but acknowledged part of his personal history. one of the smaller, quieter stories from a complicated period of change in his life. Number 5. Mia Farrow. When discussing the most significant professional chapters of Woody Allen's career, the period with Mia Farrow stands out as one of the most productive and widely recognized. Their collaboration began in the early 1980s, during a time when Mia was already an established actress with a long list of credits, and Woody was transitioning into a phase of filmmaking defined by more intimate, character-driven stories. What formed between them professionally was a sustained creative partnership that yielded some of his most admired films. In Apropos of Nothing, Woody wrote about Mia as an actress who brought a quiet intensity and emotional detail to her roles. Her performances in films like Hannah and Her Sisters, The Purple Rose of Cairo, Broadway, Danny Rose, and Alice became essential pieces of his filmography, shaping an era of work that leaned heavily on understated emotion and psychological nuance. He described her as someone with a natural ability to ground a scene, giving even the simplest dialogue a deeper internal meaning. Mia, in her own interviews and memoir, reflected on this period with acknowledgement of their artistic connection, noting how their working relationship often blended with the rhythm of their personal lives. They spent over a decade making films together, navigating scripts, character sketches, and late-night discussions about story structure. It was a time marked by consistent creative output, and their shared projects became staples of 1980s and early 1990s American cinema. Their partnership eventually ended, and both moved forward in separate directions, professionally and personally. Yet within the sphere of film history, the work they produced together remains part of the legacy of that era. Woody has repeatedly expressed respect for Mia's talent, noting that her contributions strengthened many of his films. Their collaboration, whatever its later complexities, stands as a major chapter in the evolution of his career and the shaping of his artistic identity. Number 6. Soon-Yi Previn. Among the later chapters of Woody Allen's life, his relationship with Soon-Yi Previn stands out as one he has spoken about with consistency and clarity. In his memoir, Apropos of Nothing, he describes their connection as something that formed gradually, arising from shared interests, compatible temperaments, and a sense of stability that appeared during a complicated period in his adulthood. He emphasized that their relationship began when Soon-Yi was an adult, independent, and already shaping her own path. Woody has often spoken about how different they are in personality. He more inward, routine-driven, and focused on writing. She more direct, pragmatic, and uninterested in the public side of fame. Yet those differences became balancing points. He noted that her straightforwardness brought a grounding influence into his life, something he valued deeply as he grew older and more reflective about work, relationships, and the unpredictable nature of public scrutiny. Their marriage, which began in 1997, introduced a new rhythm to his personal life. Soon-Yi built a more private world around their family, choosing to stay largely outside the industry. Over the years, both have spoken in interviews about their shared routines, simple habits, quiet evenings, and a focus on raising their children. Woody has often described her as someone who brings steadiness, and in his later interviews, he referred to their relationship as one of the most reliable constants in his adult life. While their marriage has existed in the shadow of public commentary, inside their own circle it has remained steady and enduring. Woody repeatedly credits Soon-Yi with providing a sense of calm during the later stages of his career, a grounding presence as he continued writing and directing. In his long life, this chapter represents the companionship he found not early on, but after decades of experience, growth, and change. Looking back at 89, Woody Allen speaks about these 6 women not with grand gestures or sweeping declarations, but with the measured tone of someone who understands how time reshapes memory. Each woman entered his life at a different moment, offering something distinct: support, collaboration, inspiration, stability. Some relationships were fleeting, others transformative, and a few evolved into long-lasting chapters that defined entire eras of his work. Together they form a mosaic of influence across decades of writing, directing, and personal growth. Their stories remind us that admiration can take many forms: creative respect, emotional steadiness, intellectual connection, or simple appreciation for someone's presence during a formative period. These women helped shape the man and the filmmaker he became, each leaving an imprint in her own way. Which chapter resonated most with you? Share your thoughts below, and thank you for watching Legendary Archives.